everyone. Welcome to the Self-Awareness Journey podcast. I'm Melissa Albers.
And I'm JJ Parker. This podcast is for seekers, seekers of happiness and joy, seekers of a centered approach to success in life, seekers of their true, authentic selves.
Get ready for some real talk on everything from anxiety, emotions, and habits to love, compassion, and forgiveness. We know you'll be challenged and enlightened by this conversation. We're so glad you're here. Let's dive in.
So yesterday I was in a long meeting at work, and just sitting there, kind of participating in this thing, and all of a sudden I had an overwhelming feeling that I needed to move my flight next week to Florida up by a day. Just out of the blue, like unprompted.
Yep.
So next week I'm going to Florida to go to adult tennis camp, like I do every year.
Don't say adult tennis camp.
I just love saying funny. Adult tennis camp because it's just so funny.
Why do you have to say adult? You could just say tennis camp. You are an adult, presumably, and so we do kind of get that. Sorry to side note here.
It's just way funnier to call it adult tennis camp. I think everyone should go to some sort of a, adult camp. No, that sounds bad. That sounds really bad.
No. Oh my gosh.
So I'm going to tennis camp.
And we're back.
Next week with my buddy Tom, like we do every year. And I had this intuition, this huge feeling that I needed to go a day early to go visit my parents. My parents are like, we're going to Tampa. My parents are in Fort Myers. It's like 2 hours away. And in the past, when we've gone to Tampa, I've never gone and driven down to see them. Usually because it's just we're there to go play tennis.
Yeah.
I don't know what it was yesterday that gave me such a strong feeling that I needed to go do that.
That was your intuition.
It was. And in the past, so when I was thinking about that, I was like, okay, what should I do with that feeling? Because in the past, I've had those feelings come up or those instincts come up, and I haven't acted on them. And then almost every time I regret not acting on it. So this one I decided, you know what? I'm gonna act on that. So I came home. I said, hey, Amber, I had this intuition that I needed to go see my parents. Do you mind if I go, down a day early? She's like, of course. So I just an hour ago rebooked my flight for one day earlier.
Oh, I'm so glad. You did that.
So
intuition is the coolest thing ever.
So we should talk about that because, like as a nerd, I like to think that most of my decision making's, made up here in my head with my advanced logical thinking brain. And I just don't go do things on a whim without any rationalization behind them.
And as an empath, I absolutely use my inner guidance all the time. And I think you can develop intuition. And I'm so glad that you're talking about intuition today because I'll talk about this stuff all day long. I try to avoid that woo-woo stuff that's going to freak people out.
Well,
your inner being always has messages and knows what's going on, though, all the time. You're always getting messages, just if you choose to listen and hear them.
Yeah. So when I was thinking about this a little bit, and of course doing a little bit of research on it.
I was thinking about this. Oh my gosh. Okay, let's hear it. Oh, what a hilarious response. I'm telling you, as an empath, I really like to feel things. Well, I was thinking about this, so I did some research.
This is why you and I work.
I know it.
So, well, the whole idea of gut brain, right? Trust your gut. What does your gut say? And what's ironic is I did say like, hey, I like to use, whatever you're going to call it, your head focused kind of thinking.
Right. Logic versus feeling.
Okay. That's a good way to phrase it.
Yeah.
But you know what? in reality, at work all the time, I talk about using your gut to make decisions, especially as you get into more leadership or higher level roles where you actually don't get all the information. So the only way to make decisions is by your gut. So I actually talk about that all the time. Although it's interesting that I might not be following that guidance, especially in my personal life. I'd say like I'm really good at making gut business decisions, but I tend to ignore my gut in my personal life, I think, more than I do in my business decisions.
I think a lot of people bucket how they think and feel. I think they become kind of used to thinking certain ways in certain situations and used to feeling certain ways in certain situations, and they very seldom commingle unless it's on purpose.
So the reason why I was kind of even struggling in the past with like taking action on a gut feeling is because how do I answer the question why? Like, hey JJ, why did you decide to rebook your flight? I don't know. I just felt like I should. Right? Like there's no justification to that decision.
Why do you feel like there has to be?
I think I'm coming to a point where like I'm accepting that there doesn't have to be. But all I'm doing is I'm kind of recognizing
really
for me that the reason I will ignore my gut is because I can't answer the question, why did you decide that? What was the logic and rationale that led you to that decision? And if I can't back that, to that feeling. And if I can't back that up, then I just decide to not do the thing my gut told me to do.
Right. Yeah. So it's almost like you were asking yourself the wrong question there. Asking, you had a gut feeling, and the question was, why can't you back that up with what's your logic behind that? And maybe that's the wrong question.
And that would lead me to, and in the past, that would lead me to inaction.
Yeah.
Right? Or that would lead me to dismiss the feeling, or that would lead me to not do the thing that my gut was telling me to do.
I really feel like the entire world, and I'm not even being dramatic when I say that, I feel like the whole consciousness, the whole world is becoming way more open to recognizing these feelings inside of ourselves and that they are connecting and real. Like, I really believe that. I think that there are a number of people who have always had a really strong relationship with their intuition. I have a really strong relationship with my intuition, and I've worked over the years to establish ways of making it grow because I love it. And I don't ask myself, what's the rationale? The question that I ask myself when I'm trying to figure it out, and we can talk about this, is it coming from the right place? Is this a true feeling, or is this a thought?
Okay.
Because it's kind of different.
Yeah.
So that's the question I ask.
So how do you discern the difference between those things?
It's simple. It's so simple. It's going to be such a boring conversation. How it feels. If I get a ping,
you can discern between a feeling and a thought is how it feels.
Yes, in your body, in your mind, as you unpack it, as you start to like explore it, like, there's the good word. That's more observational. As you explore it, okay, so you get a ping. I should change my flight.
Yep.
Right. And then right there, you said typically then you'd go into the logical sequencing of that. Where did that thought come from? Why did I think that? Can I validate that? Why would I do that? But what I do now is I get a ping, and then I say, does that feel good in my body? Or does that feel like fear? Because I don't think anything of truth is laced with fear. Like you locking in with your inner being, like you being with you. Those are good feelings. Your inner being always knows where you're going. Your inner being always knows what's happening, always. And it's always steering you or attempting to steer you in the direction of what is in your highest and best interest.
Yeah, I actually, as I was like researching this a little bit, I read this thing that said, when you want to learn to use your intuition more, that one of the things you need to do is be able to discern a gut feeling from fear.
Oh my gosh.
I mean, and you just said the exact same thing. And as I was thinking about that, I was thinking like, yeah, a lot of times like fear, it has a similar feeling, or it comes from a similar place. Like you feel, fear really comes, for me at least, kind of like maybe from my gut also.
From your guts, like in your center, in your like torso, in the middle of your torso. Like,
and that's the same place a gut decision would come from. So, discerning which is which is a skill to develop.
See, I don't feel like that. No, I mean,
you understand. Do you understand it? I mean,
I understand what you're saying 100%. And I can also see how that would be what you're feeling like, because they do feel like they're kind of close. But for me, I've like been in this for so long that I actually can feel it slightly different. Like, fear for me is in my stomach. Intuition and inner being connection is more in my heart. It's like a slightly different location. I know this sounds so silly, but I just have spent a lot of time trying to discern the difference, because I think fear is the great equalizer. Makes everybody stop doing everything. It makes everybody go into their heads. It makes everybody start trying to be careful, and which by then they end up being further away from their inner being, because they're trying to serve something that isn't even real. It's, false evidence appearing real, as they say, for fear.
One of the other things I kind of read about was that like anxiety can make it harder for you to listen to your gut. That's very true.
Amen. Yeah.
You get right back up into your head, and you just start spinning and spinning and spinning, and you.
Hey, we just did a pod on that, ruminating on stressful thoughts.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the more time you spend in your head, the less ability you have to like listen to your gut and trust your gut.
Right. And hear it. Even just hear it. I think people, the other thing just in this conversation is I want to ask you to describe something. So when you said you got an overwhelming feeling that you should move your flight, is that how you phrased it? Did you hear a voice? Was it something in your stomach? Was it a specific sentence that you heard? Was it a physical sense? What was it?
No, we're like, let's see. What was I
This is really important for everybody to think about.
I was in a meeting listening to a speaker talk about artificial intelligence. So this was, we're like not in.
So your mind was.
Yeah, we are not in the ballpark of tennis, Florida, or parents.
Yeah.
So, but.
And what did you hear, or what did you
feel?
So what did you hear? Did you hear anything?
No, I didn't hear. I didn't hear anything, except possibly like I might have heard like my own voice. Maybe not really. All I did was think. All of a sudden, I just thought, hey, I should move my flight up. What I heard was I should move my flight up. Like, why wouldn't I do that? That's all I heard, is I should move my flight up.
Okay, and then did you immediately question that sentence? Like, I'm being really nitpicky here for a minute, because I think this is very important. Like, as people are trying to understand their own intuition and how they tap into intuition, there are several ways that you can connect with your intuition. And there's, the audio where you can hear it, the sensing where you feel it, the knowing through your mind. And everybody's different. And you can have more than one, obviously. It can be a number of things, but that's kind of like the first place to start discerning what that intuition is in relation, how that intuition's in relationship
so,
with you.
Yeah, I just had this thought that I should move my flight up. And then I was like, why would I move my flight up? Oh yeah, because I go see my parents. Because I didn't really realize, like the first thought was I should move my flight up, but it didn't come with why. And then I was like,
oh, interesting.
Oh yeah, because I should go see my parents. They're 2 hours away from where I'm gonna be. Why I should go do that? I should go do that.
Wow.
And
yeah.
And that was about it. Then I just kind of was like, that was a weird uprising of a feeling.
Yeah. I think for me, when I've had intuitive moments, they come in a lot of different varieties, but they almost don't feel like me. And it's very subtle. That's the thing with intuition. I think you have to be, which is why we're always talking about be in your centered space, learn to be mindful, learn to meditate. Like this is all of it. This is why. I mean, people aren't saying you should learn to meditate so that you have a new skill of meditating. The only reason that you want to meditate is to get you into partnership with your true inner being. That's what it's for, right? And I think that requires being more quiet. And I think the more you are centered and more quiet, the more you can hear all the varying ways that information is coming to you through your intuition. I had a golden retriever a few years ago. And I always have golden retrievers. That's nothing new. But this particular one, I was petting her and she was just laying on her side and I was petting her. And as I pet her, I felt this small lump by her shoulder blade. And I heard, almost like a shout, the words, "Get it out." Get it out. And I was like, what in the world? And then I talked myself out of it. I was like, oh, I'll have to get that checked. But I dismissed, and it was the strongest voice I've ever heard in intuition. And meanwhile, a couple of months later, she died of cancer. Now that's a sad example, but it is one in which the message was super clear. And I went into this whole, well, I'll just maybe get
that's
it
the
checked.
thing, the rationalizing,
the rational
out of out of the feeling, out of the intuition.
Yeah. I feel like the more that you have an awareness when you start getting these little pings, the more you follow the breadcrumbs, so to speak, the more they appear for you. The more validation you give them, the more you hear, the more information you can have. And it becomes really cool. Yeah. It's really fun to play with it.
And, reflecting on this, I had already said it, but like reflecting on this, I can remember times where I had an intuition to do something and I didn't. And most of the cases, like I remember having an intuition. Well, actually, I had a very strong intuition one day to call yours and my former mentor, Don Kiley. I was like, I need to call Don, like right now. And I didn't do it. Like, cause I was at work, cause there's stuff going on. I'm like, I'll do it later. I'll do it tomorrow. Right. And he passed away and I never had a chance to make that last phone call.
Yeah.
And if I would have just trusted that gut, there was nothing at work that day that was more important than hearing Don's voice one last time. Right.
Well,
I mean,
and that's such a human condition because we get afraid of feeling our feelings. And when we get intuition, oftentimes it's guiding us towards something that is really good for us. But the human experience of like, oh, it's going to be really awkward. What do I say? He's sick.
Right. He's sick.
Terminal.
He can barely talk.
What do you say? I don't want to bother him. He probably doesn't feel good. He's probably not even on his phone. Like that's all really normal stuff that we do.
But I regret not doing it. So.
Yeah. It's interesting. Well, what else did it say about growing in your intuition? You just mentioned one thing, or was that it?
Well, we've been talking about all the things like trust yourself. Really trust yourself. Again, this is the whole thing of we just talked about rationalizing, but just accept it and trust that it's a good decision. And the enteric nervous system is technically what your gut brain is called. They call it the second brain.
Oh, cool! I didn't know that.
But there's like as many neurons.
Enteric.
E-N-T-E-R-I-C.
Okay.
There's as many neurons in your gut that there are in your brain. So like we like to think that our brains are isolated to this like gray matter in our head, but it's actually really like our whole body and really in our gut. And there was some stuff talking about like second brain, gut brain, and even how nutrition. I think when we had Megan on, she like actually alluded to this, how like your nutrition really affects your mood and your decision making because it has such a big effect on your gut.
Yes, actually, all of Eastern medicine, when you look at the Indian versions of herbs and everything else like that, they call the gut the second brain. That's what they call it. That's what they call it. And they've been around a lot longer than Western medicine.
And then the other thing I was
they've learned to use
thinking
that.
about this was in the context of sports. I'm like, I have a big tennis tournament this weekend. So, but tennis, there's a couple other sports that are really fast, reactive sports, like baseball. Like this, like hitting a baseball is a very fast reaction. Hitting a tennis ball, very fast reaction, and those sports, like you can't actually think. The highest level players in those sports are not thinking with their head. They are just using reaction and gut to do these things. Like you can't even see a baseball traveling at, like 190 whatever miles an hour that they pitch.
Yeah.
You can't see the serve coming at you at 110 miles an hour. But somehow you can react to it, which is pretty amazing.
Right. It is.
So this idea that your rational brain actually slows everything down and encumbers decision making is interesting, and sports is a good example of how it does that. So
absolutely,
there's a really great book called The Inner Game of Tennis, and it talks all about how you need to turn off your rational brain and only use instinct on the court. Because as soon as your brain starts thinking, oh, I need to like backswing, step, move, when you start putting those commands into yourself,
it's over.
It's over. You can't move fast enough.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
And then
I think too. Go ahead.
Then corollary to that was around just regular decision making. So I'm not saying like, hey, everything we need to do needs to be in a super high pace split second thing.
Right. Intuitive space.
But this one idea that I came across to help you develop your gut instincts is when you have a decision to make, like write it on a piece of paper, write maybe like the options that you have in front of you, walk away from it for a little while, come back to it, read the question, and circle the first one that you feel. That's it. You're laughing because you're like you're just so in tune with this stuff. The rest of us have to maybe use some of these techniques.
It's not true. That is not true. No, but the other thing I think, just some kind of like inner techniques too. I think, one of the very first things is, like let's just say there's a food that you will eat and it doesn't make you feel good inside. Like it might be something you're allergic to, or your body doesn't like it. And then there's a food that you absolutely love and your body just does really, really well with it. Okay. Just using that as an example. Okay. You know, if you eat the thing that doesn't taste good, you're going to have a strange reaction, and you're going to say to yourself, intuitively, I knew I wasn't supposed to eat that. I knew I wasn't supposed to eat that. And I got a little ping to remind me. Okay. Because we're getting these internal pings all the time. And so I think like being able to recognize, like, even just sitting for a moment and just taking a second and just saying what feels right, not what feels I'm going to win. So it's all about what the sponsoring thought is behind the feeling. And I think just understanding getting in the habit of checking your sponsoring thought, because if a sponsoring thought is based in competition or ego, unhealthy ego, or a negative, then the quote feeling that you have coming up is probably not intuition. That's probably ego and brain trying to control. Because your inner being is never going to send you intuition that feels bad. Never. So if you have a feeling like, I wonder if I should call my son right now. I do that all the time. I'll be like, oh, I wonder if I should call him right now. And then I will feel like yes or no, not right now. Or yeah, you should right now. And just as I've paid attention to that, I can call my kids, or I can get my phone. How many times have you picked up your phone to call someone and they were right there on the phone calling you? Have you ever had stuff like that happen?
Yep, that's a weird coincidence.
It's the same thing. It's the same thing. It's just, and so like, I will easily pick up my phone. It happens at least once a week, where I will think about one of my clients and I get an email right after. I'll be like, oh yeah, thank you. Oh yeah, thank you. And I always say thank you. I always say thank you. It comes in different ways.
Your intuition. That's awesome.
Yeah, so that it feels validated and keeps growing inside. Like, so I think really just recognizing the sponsoring thoughts behind it and feeling real joy at having a connection with yourself. It's an amazing thing, and it's a wonderful tool to develop, and it will help in so many ways you have no idea, in the future.
Yep, awesome. This is fun. Okay, so
this
is now a new perspective for me to follow my intuition more.
I love it. I hope you do.
Did you enjoy this episode? Please go to your favorite podcast platform to subscribe, rate, and leave a review so others can discover it as well.
Growing self-awareness is a lifelong journey, and there's always further to go. And it's better when we're all in it together. Please think of someone you know who could benefit from hearing today's conversation and share this episode with them. We can't thank you enough for listening. Until next time, happy exploring, seekers.